Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to finish off another scene here, and this one is going to be my Redwood National Forest type of scene, and let's add in some color to this. I imagine this area down below kind of being your kind of mulchy, reddish tinged walkway down below, but let's get a little bit of color in this piece. I thought I would go with the Memento bamboo leaves. I thought that would be a good one. You can go with the peeled paint, that type of kind of a little bit more aged looking green tones here. And I'm going to put some of this in the background. So I'm just masking off some of the trees out here in the background. Maybe we'll, we might put some of this in the foreground too, but I'm not quite sure yet. Okay, now it doesn't need to be one continuous batch of foliage. That's not how I see this piece kind of developing or needing, okay? It's just kind of, you want some green tones there in the background, and that will kind of pair nicely with this kind of rusty type of reddish tinged color theme that we'll be utilizing in here. The thing about these trees and the ground area, we'll want to create, some really good continuity between those two. So we'll have a little bit of the green and the red, and the red and the green. All right, setting these down like this. You see, as I'm just kind of masking off my trees, my trunks a little bit. If you get some of the green in the trunks, that's not a big deal. Okay, now this one right here, I really blotted off that trunk in the background, so I'm going to create a lighter impression of this green by blotting it off first, and then going for the impression here. So we're following suit here, see? Instead of using the bamboo leaves at full strength with every impression, what you do is you just vary it, and you'll get a different color or a different value of a certain hue than, than just straight from the pad. So you're really maximizing your use of your inks when you utilize them that way. Use drier versions of them as well as the full saturations for a nice varied look. Okay, so see that right there? That kind of helps in this whole kind of canopy of foliage type of situation here. Okay, so let's take a look here and kind of make an assessment here. Okay, what I'm assessing is something that I talked about in my previous video on lighting, okay? Now I have a lot of videos on lighting, and you can look up Stampscapes Easy Lighting, and you'll come up with, I don't know, at this point in time, I don't know if there's a dozen videos. I mean, I talk about lighting in all my different ones, but I really kind of isolated, the subject matter and focus on it in terms of some of the presentations here. But on this one right here, there isn't some sort of formal, or definitive, I should say, area of light. So it's just up to you or us as creators of our scenario to just define the light. Okay, so I'm looking at an area in here. I want to do these kind of crepuscular light types of rays coming into the scene. And I'm thinking I'm going to, this to me seems like the natural place, because I stamped out my oak branch lighter in this area than in the other areas off to the side, okay? And this tree happens to be very light right back here too, okay? Usually it's just somewhere, center or left or right of center, okay? I mean, you can do it full right side or left side too. I mean, it's up to you. Sometimes, you just make it dark and you just have an area down below, which is light, but in most cases I like to create that light source and reflected light dialogue within my pieces. So in other words, you create some area of light somewhere in your scene, and then you have some area where the light is being reflected. Okay, now we have this big, huge, you know, redwood tree here. By the way, this isn't a redwood, but in this kind of scenario, it becomes a redwood tree. Okay, so I'm just going in here with some antique linen. It's kind of mixed in with some of the inks that are already on here. Okay. Even though this is really dry, but I am getting a pretty good amount of that black coming off. It will happen, you know. Don't worry about that. Now, if it's like super wet, you know, just be careful about your application. Maybe heat set or something like that. But overall, this scene is going to get much darker anyway, so I typically don't worry about that. I know some people really do. Now, we don't want smeared fences or something like that, but if it's just kind of like some smeared tone, you know, within a tree like that, you can't even really tell. It just looks like you're utilizing antique linen and a little bit of gray or something like that. Okay, so my lighting is going to be what they call backlighting, okay? So this tree right here is going to be casting a shadow this way. Now, how do you create a shadow? Well, I just kind of create a stronger base of whatever color I'm using. Then I kind of create a little bit of a transition going from full saturation to a little bit lighter out here. Okay, now this is a big tree though, so you know it's just going to depend. Now see these trees right here, I'm kind of creating this situation of lighting. I mean, it's really hard to tell right now because this is just a really light tone that I'm working with, but you can kind of see what I'm going for here. See this little bit of light, there's a little bit of corridor of light like that, and it just makes sense to have this little character and a little bit of a lighting as well. Now I might not want them in stark white light, you know, so you can put some of this lightest tone down here, but when I get darker and darker, you know, we'll kind of create a little bit of a pathway for that light to come this way in here, okay? So if I was to take a ruler or something like that, it would go like this, you know. You would create those, that light area from here to down here. Now it's a little bit different because we have these trunks here, so you create that lighting kind of going from this area this way. So you have everything kind of going to a central vanishing point. Your shadows over here, like say at the base of this tree, would go this way at this angle, okay? Now you don't need to necessarily take a ruler and say, okay, wait, that goes right here, I'm going to have to go right here. Oh, I went a little bit over this way, I messed up. You know, it's not like that, okay? Because you have different things within your pieces. You know, there's shadows blocking off. There, you know, everything that's in the scene isn't necessarily everything that there would be in this type of compositional scenario. There could be other trees out here. There could be foliage, you know, much closer to us casting shadows. So, you know, don't worry about any of that. Just in general, I'm going to keep this area light down here and a little bit of light down here. And then I'll show you what we do with some crepuscular ray formations, okay? Now, like right here, since the lighting is right here, I put a little bit of light on the left-hand side of this trunk, okay? And there's a little bit of light on the right side of this one that's to the left of the lighting there, okay? So those are little types of details that you can kind of develop. And what I like doing is I like developing them with the lightest color that I'm going to be working with, which is this antique linen right here. Could be any, you know, light tone. Walnut stain's a little bit darker. It doesn't have to be distressing either. You know, if I had a pale orange Marvy pad, that would be fine. You know, there's all kinds of different colors out there. I typically like to work with colors, but I have done things where it's more grayscale. But see, you can see where that walnut stain's, you know, darker than the antique linen. It's not super dark. It's just like one kind of value darker, but you can see, can you see that kind of area down here by the tree. Now watch this as I kind of taper it off. So I'll put a lot of it right there at the base, so stay there a lot longer. Then as you get drier, then you start moving it away from there. And what you get is that transitioning shadow going from darker to lighter out here. You can see this area of light starting to develop. You know, there's some light coming from back there. Maybe it's going down this way. I don't know, but like I said, it's you can't you know we're referencing the objects within our scene for sure, okay, but it's not only those objects that might influence the things that are going on within the scene. So don't get caught up, you know, too much in that whole kind of thing. Use it as kind of a starting point, you know. Okay, the tree is there, so here's a shadow here, but don't worry about, you know, adding a shadow down here because or something like that, because, you know, doesn't have to be a straight path for lighting or something of that sort, okay? Now, how do you know to move to your next color, okay? Well, in the areas where I am going to apply whatever color that I happen to be working with at the moment, at the time, when I've applied a lot of the whatever color I'm working with, in this case right now it's walnut stain, I'll know to move on when I want to make some area darker, but using more ink just simply isn't changing it. You know, it will a color will only get so dark, okay? It's not as if we can apply 1,000,000 layers of walnut stain and it's going to suddenly, you know, it's going to turn to black eventually. No, it's just it'll get as dark as that color that it represents, okay? So, when you've achieved kind of the full saturation of that tone, and if you want to go darker in a certain area, then change colors and go to a darker value. All right, but I like this kind of this color scheme right here. Now it's developing here. Color and lighting. You think that kind of that green and you know, the distressing tones are looking pretty good. This is looking pretty bright right now. You know, distressings are supposed to be, you know, kind of dull colors, you know, aged looking, you know. But not too bad in terms of brightness here. It's real warm. There's a real warm tinge to it. Okay, now in here, I think I'm going to just put a few little areas of this tone down. It was looking a little bit too white in there for me. I do want some white, though. I want to retain some of it for the rays that I'm going to add into the scene. All right? All right. This is developing a lot faster than I thought, just with, I don't know, 2 colors so far. Which is good, you know. If we can get to kind of that, I don't know, final destination, you know, with less, then that's good. And where is that final destination? Really, wherever you want to go. However you see it, okay? Okay, so this is just some Marvy brown. It's a little bit of a brighter brown. Marvy inks tend to be pretty bright in their saturation, brightness, okay? I won't use too much, you know. When you go darker and darker, what you do is you use less and less of that color, okay? Of that value. Okay, so right here, this is a dark brown. I mean, you can really see the lighting scheme, the shadow schemes in here. Now, kind of watch my movement here. See, I'm kind of tapping this in the same area. I'm not really coloring like this as if it were a paintbrush or something. You're kind of just dabbing and building tone, but you're kind of moving it around a little bit. You don't want to just stay. You know, you want to take a look and see what you're developing there, okay? Bringing this up into the trees. I'm thinking about maybe adding a touch more warmth, huh? Let me see if I have. I think, yeah, I have this reddish fired brick. Let's try some of this red, okay? I'm going to use the same paper towel, so it's more of a reddish brown, right? And that would be a great color for this. Okay, so I don't want cranberry red or something like this in these trees, so let's just kind of add, you know, a slight amount of it at first. Because when you're doing it like this, when you're adding just a little bit of it at a time, you can really see what's happening. It's not as if you're going to add like a little bit like that and say, oh my god, I've ruined the color, you know. But you can kind of see what color these things are developing to be, just with a very light application of it at first, okay? Okay, I'm going to bring some of this reddish tinge into the ground area as well, because you know, these trees are shedding this color into the surrounding area, so you know, you can put some of it down here like this. All right. I like this color scheme. Let's go back and use a little bit more of this brown too, okay? A couple of areas got a little bit redder than I wanted. Or, I don't know, than I prefer, so what you do is you just go back and add a little bit of brown to it. Or, you know, some distressing linen, walnut stain, whatever you want, okay? So that's what you do. You just use kind of smaller amounts of your existing colors, and you know, they're easy to manipulate that way. Okay, so let's see. I think that should do it about. Okay, now what I'm going to do here, let me show you something now. I've shown this in a previous video too, but oh, let's do some. I added a little bit too much red there. Let's go with a little bit more of this brown in there too. I'm going to add a little bit of bluish tinge in here, all right? And a little bit of a bluish tinge will be a nice addition, I think, down here. I wonder if I should do it with my inks, or if I should just go with a super pale blue. This is pale blue. Pen, okay? So sometimes what I do is I just come into these areas like this. This is a good choice here, actually, because it doesn't mix with the dye-based inks down here. This is an alcohol ink pen, okay? So I'm just putting some of this blue down in these open areas. Retain some of the white, though, okay? Don't go all blue. I don't know if you can see that at all. It's really, really subtle. Okay, but I don't know if you can see the difference between here, the white here, and the blue up here. It's a little bit different, you know? And then I left a little white down here, but I put some blue in these areas, just so it's not kind of stark white. I don't know if you can see just a slight tinge of cool tones in there. Okay, so let's get into what I think is going to be the most fun part about this. I love doing, you know, rays and kind of special effects in my pieces here. Let me see, before I get to that, now that I've used that paint pen, let's grab a few colors out of my paint pen color scheme. I have some, oh, these are just some super cheap shuttle art pens. You can use your Copic markers, etc. But these will just kind of give us a little bit of a richer, potentially richer color scheme. Okay. I like to apply it down and then blend it out. Okay. Yeah, it's nice and rich and deep. And then these might not match sometimes when it dries, but what you do is you spray seal the whole thing, and it'll unify both dye-based inks and alcohol inks in texture. Okay. Here's a little bit of peach tinge. Okay. And now, I mean, these pens like this. I mean, see this real narrow tree back here? Yeah, you can't do that with like a paper towel, so just come into it with an alcohol marker, and that does the trick. Oh, one thing I forgot as I'm doing this. I forgot to use black. I'll use some black in here for my final shading color. Okay, so let's go like that, and that should do that. All right. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit richer. These are just very light values. They're lighter than a lot of the values that I've already used on the tree, okay? So it's not like these colors really stand out. It just looks deeper in terms of a three-dimensional object, okay? One technique in painting, I don't know what they call it. It'd be by the Dutch masters, one of the kind of techniques they used in their paintings. I think they were called trompe-l'oeil, to fool the eye. Is you lay down kind of monochromatic paintings, and then you start layering multiple coats of transparent colors. So that's what you can do with alcohol inks and dye-based inks. They're transparent, okay? And the surfaces just look richer and richer the more you layer onto there. Okay, now I'm going on with black since all these objects were stamped out in black. Using black, but using kind of more of a gray, okay? See that right there? Using more of a grayish application of it, again, making use of all of your different inks by using different amounts of them in terms of your wetness, okay? Relative moisture content, or whatever you'd call it, really expands your usage of it. So how would you like to buy one black pad, or a pad that can be, 30 versions of gray? That's black, but just using it in various saturations, okay? With colors, it doesn't change the hue, it just changes the value. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to buy one green. Well, a lighter version of this green is still a very warm version of that green. A lighter version of this green is not this green right here. But you can get any color from this down to white, okay? Okay, so see this right here, kind of really, this is really developing the lighting scheme even more by putting down a shadow down there in the darkest color, but it's not the darkest use of that color, it's just black. And okay, I'm going to close off the composition a little bit more by making the slapping on a vignette into the scene. Okay, so that'll focus more of the attention where I want the viewer to see. You look. Okay, which is right in here and in this area. Okay, so tipping the edges, going a little bit darker in the four corners. Okay, when you do a little bit of a vignette like this framing device, okay? You really enclose the image, and it makes it seem like a world unto itself. It's not, you know, just part of a greater whole that's missing something, okay? You're making a statement unto itself here, okay? All right, so that was the black. Let's put a little bit more at the base of this tree, this mighty tree. I really need to get over to like the Redwood National Forest sometime and see that again. I think we went there when I was, I don't know, I might have been 5 years old or something like that, so it's been really quite some time since I've seen any of this. Okay, I'm going a little bit darker at the tops of these trunks here. A lot of times I don't do that, but it's supposed to be like a canopy of, you know, foliage up there, so it would stand to reason that it could be a lot darker up top there like that. Okay, so that is that. Don't forget your black, you know, and kind of grayscale usage. And it really kind of anchors your pieces really well in terms of light and shade, okay? Okay, so cotton balls here. We'll do a couple things in here, okay? We'll add kind of a general haze in the piece. But we'll also do some of what I really love doing, which are what we call crepuscular rays, okay? There's those light beams that are kind of working their way through you know, whatever objects are within that space. Okay, so this is just some white pigment ink. You can, on this type of paper here, you can use whatever type of pigment ink you have. If you have some Hero Arts, Unicorn, whatever. I happen to be using a little bit faster drying pigment ink in the Brilliance. I think my pigment ink here is looking a little bit dry. I try to keep this pad kind of more at a, like a medium wetness. I don't want it too sopping wet. Okay, so, but let's put some ink on here. Let's see, I usually keep a little bit of a cardstock or something around to spread this around. Here we go. I have my National Park year pass right here. Is that kind of within the theme of the piece? That's probably, that looks like Acadia to me. I'm not sure. Unless like, that could be one of the Great Lakes. I'm not sure. Okay, so like I said, I don't want to use this like in a real blobby style of application here, so I like to keep this not too wet. Okay, so if you re-ink, or if you're not sure, kind of really blot it off quite a bit before you start applying it, okay? It is entirely possible to use too much of this, but if you do, you just wipe it off, okay? And start over again, especially on glossy cardstock, you can do that. Okay, so I'm just applying this in the area where I've retained some light, so you're kind of taking additional light and you're working it into the shadows, okay? So you're transitioning. We transitioned shadows from dark to light. We're transitioning light from light to dark, okay? It's the opposite way. So you kind of tap it a little bit, and then you kind of move in there, okay? And then you really utilize the lighter, drier version of this to get a lighter application of it, okay? Just like you do with dark inks, you utilize the lighter, drier version to get a lighter version of it. When you're doing this one, you're not getting a darker version of white. You're just applying less over dark imagery, okay? All right, so you know, this is pretty subtle right here because I'm not utilizing it too much. I don't want to use too much because I know what I'm going to be doing in here with the rays, which I think we are ready for. But look at this at the base of that tree right there. See how I just kind of added that along, you know, that area, and right here, the light is coming from that way, so I put a little bit, you know, on the side of this tree right here. On this one, lighting is coming in from over here, so I'm left side illuminating that tree a touch. Okay, you can run some of this, you know, within that green foliage in the background too, like that. But you can see, doesn't it make for a nice, rich looking kind of lighting scheme in here? And let's see, I left a little bit of light down here, so let's put a little bit of fences and a little bit of light. Okay, so see that, what it does to that fence back there? It's just a little bit different than the surrounding area, so it's not so monotonous in terms of the value scale with the lighting. You know, we're saying that light is affecting the fencing, you know, to some degree. See that? Okay, so let's see. I think we are ready for some of something that I really love doing, and I would recommend you give it a try. You can use this on anything. You can do word stamps with a, you know, light flare, crepuscular rays coming out from it, and you can really bring drama to just so many different visual situations. Okay, lighting isn't just, you know, for scenes. Okay, let's see. Let's grab a piece of paper right here, and let me just use a piece of paper right here, and that's your light beams. Okay, I'm going to just select some area in here as my focal point. I'm going to do it at the tip of that little tree in the background. See that one back there? That will be my focal point for light. Okay, and well, not focal point, but it's more of like a vanishing point, I should say. Okay, I don't know, maybe I should make it a little bit farther back, but I don't know. It'll be a pretty good reference point right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some light beams coming into the scene. I tell you what, no, let's make the focal point a little bit higher up here like this. I think I want my angles to be well, I don't know. Now I'm thinking about it. I guess it doesn't matter. Let's go a little bit higher than that. I'll put this little branch on this tree. Okay, so anytime we put a light beam, you see, you kind of aim it at that same point, okay? So, that being said, you want to change your kind of beam width occasionally, okay, as you do this, and beam strength. So I'm adding a little bit more ink over here and less over here. You can add the same amount, but see, here's the beam right here. I have it going in back of this tree and in front of this one. You see that? And we'll do that. We'll have another beam. I'll put the vanishing point here. I tell you what, we'll come in front of this tree and in front of this tree too, right? So you can just play around like that. Everything doesn't have to be the same. In fact, it looks better if you vary it, okay? So there's no saying, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I put that beam in front of that one time, and I forgot to put it in front of the other one. Well, you know, beams of light kind of travel through kind of open spaces, and, you know, maybe there wasn't an open space for that other one that is behind an object. So see that right there? All right. See how that's working? Isn't that fun? If you do one beam, it looks kind of out of place, okay? So you have to do kind of a few. Yeah, keep the spacing a little bit different. You know, I'll have this one kind of a more narrow beam here. I will put it behind this other tree, okay? Okay. See what we're starting to work out here. And I'll have a beam coming right through here too. All right. Or I can do a wider beam somewhere else. You know, it's really whatever you want to do. If you ever get a beam that you don't like, then just wipe it off with a paper towel or a cotton ball or something like that. It'll come off. And then you can redo it or do it lighter or whatever. You know, or less distinct, I should say, not lighter. If you want to go lighter, then you just put the mask over it and add more white ink. I think on this one over here, on the left-hand side, I'm going to really taper it off to where it kind of disappears. So like that, it doesn't go off all the way to the edge of the page. Okay, and let's go about like that. How close am I to the other beam? Now, after I lay these in here, I have to kind of blend things together. It can, the beams can look quite strong in terms of visual, so we'll blend them in a little bit more than what we have right now. The kind of having these crepuscular rays through the trees is a really perfect opportunity to do this type of thing, because this is kind of the perfect scenario for these varied beams in here. Okay, see that right there? We can have some coming up too. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have most of them just kind of going down though. Okay, now when I was mentioning, let's see, I got a little bit over that tree, so I'm just wiping it off. So what I do is I just come in here and add a little bit more at the point of whatever emanation. And we'll add some more of this ink in, like so. Okay. Let's go with one up, I think, here. Yeah, I think that looks good, actually. Let's go with another one up here, too. Sometimes if I do a beam wide enough, I'll only hit one side of it. Like in this case, maybe the top portion, and the bottom portion kind of tapers off too. So you can taper from light to darker over here, or more to less, but you can also go more to less, top to bottom or something like that, or bottom to top, whatever you want to do. Okay, I think that did it right there. Let's wipe off a little bit of that part off the tree right here, so we can have it really coming from behind that part of the tree. And you have these beams in here. Doesn't that really kind of animate the piece and make it look more three-dimensional? Okay. Now here's where you fine-tune things. If you want to make some beams a little bit lighter in certain areas, then just go back over them again. These beams will, when they dry, they dry less, they're less they move towards transparency. They're not transparent, but they're just moving that way in terms of the scale. For some reason, when pigment ink dries, it isn't as white as what it looks like when freshly applied. Okay, let's see. We'll work on those a little bit more. Okay. Okay, I just took a few minute break here. Oh, the colors are looking still pretty saturated here. And I just put a little bit more ink in my Brilliance pad here. It was getting still a little bit dry. Like I said, I like to keep it, a little bit more on the medium, whatever, dampness. I don't like, oh, that's way too much. Just be aware of how much ink you're applying. Okay, let me blot some of that off. I applied too much there. You can always remove the pigment ink before it dries. Actually, you can remove it after it's dry too, when it's on glossy cardstock. You just wipe it right off. That being said, you'll want to spray seal this when you're done. Okay. I just want to integrate the beams with the scene a little bit more, using a little bit more of this kind of low-level kind of forest floor fog effect. Okay, so adding it down there, and what that's doing is it's decreasing the contrast between that trunk and this beam in that lower area. I'm not doing it all up and down the tree, but it just seems like it matches a little bit more. Okay, adding a little bit. It needed to be stronger right at the source of light right in here. I mean, these are just little fine-tuning types of things. I think it looked fine as is, but it just looks a little bit more refined by adjusting some of these areas in here. Let's look at the base of the trunks here. That's pretty close to the source of light, so we'll add a little bit more in there. All right, I think that looks pretty decent. Okay, now, what's going through my head now is I think a little bit more foliage in the piece, and I'm thinking about using the same oak branch, okay? But I think I'll do that in a nice dark black. Okay, now, when you're stamping in some kind of ink over the top of a pigment ink, actually this pigment ink right here, it's water-based ink, so it'll work just fine with anything. But if you want to go with something that's really stark black on cardstock like this, you can go with, let's pull out our big guns and go with our VersaFine Clair here. That should be a nice stark black. But the cardstocks can pretty much take it, just about anything. This being oil-based ink, though, I don't know if I would want to stamp this over, say, colored pencil. It may or may not work, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure if an oil-based medium would work on wax, and if it would stick to it. But even if it doesn't stick and it's prone to wiping off, then you can spray seal it, and it would seal it right in there. Just as long as it would be able to apply, you'd be fine. Okay, so we're reiterating the foliage that's going on in the background, in the foreground here, but in a darker tone. So we've created continuity from a shape standpoint, from the back to front, okay? But we're just creating further depth by this being a darker version of those textures going on in the background. In the background, it's really kind of hard to see what it is, but it's just kind of a loose textural element. So what you have is that in the foreground, and you have that in the background like that. So you've kind of sandwiched, the foliage in many ways. Okay, let me bring a little bit of this foliage coming in from here too. See, this is it's kind of a darker element in the upper left and right corner too, right? And you can put some, around on the sides like this too. And what this is doing is it's kind of reiterating that darkness in the corners, which again helps in the framing process of your piece. Okay, so that is just the coloring, the details and stamping. I haven't used any paint pen on here at all, but sometimes I like to, well, sometimes just about all the time, every time I do a scene, I like to add a little bit of a, oh, I don't know, it's kind of sparkle and shimmer, not necessarily with metallics, but just in terms of a kind of sparkly light, like, you can see the highlights on these pen pads right here. Without that pad, that sparkle right there, this becomes the same plane as that, but having that little shine right there says that this goes off into a different direction. So there's these different types of cues like that that are happening all around us. We just, take it for granted. We're not thinking about why that's there. You can see the, even on black, there's a highlight on this because it's a shiny surface, but it differentiates this top portion with the side portion like that, okay? Now, how, oh, that's all fine and good, but how do you apply it to something like this, okay? It's really easy. If you think about these objects in here as not being all flat, okay, which of course they are, but you think about them in terms of space, okay? So these trees back in here, okay, the light is coming from the left side of them. So on the left side of this tree, you can put a few little highlights like this on that side of that tree, facing the light. Now it's white against a light area, so you really can't see it too much, but I don't know, can you see that little highlighting on that? There's none on this, so you can see the difference between that and that. It's real subtle, okay? Here's another tree back here. What you do is you don't have to outline it, but I put a few more dots in the lighter area, then I kind of taper it off, okay? Now, on this tree right here, the lighting is coming from the right side, so we're going to right side illuminate that tree, okay? You can even do it on these kind of darker leafless pines right here. Okay. See that little lighting on that leafless pine? Like that? See how it's catching the light? And do you see the lighting on this trunk right here? There's those little dots. Okay, now, well, there's no outline down here or something like that. You don't have, it doesn't have to be, but why don't we put a few little highlights down in this area? It's like a real little shimmery, sparkly light. You condense it a little bit more, and then you have it kind of more spread out, okay? I'm not going to go down here too much because a white dot will really stand out, but you could use colored dots too down in this area, like a beige or something like that if you don't want it too, with too much contrast. Like white might stand out a little bit too much at times, so, you can go with like a beige color. Nowadays they have like a really vast array of colors available in paint pens. So it really puts us, it really puts us in the position of having a large repertoire of colored light at our hands. If we're using the lighter versions of these pens on darker areas, then that becomes light. If we use it on white, this is darker, okay? So it's all kind of those relationships that you're establishing throughout your piece. Okay, so that is that. The rays really become a pretty formidable player in this scene in terms of the attention, right? It's all about these trees, but I don't know, it becomes more of a, the star of the show, those rays that were added in around our imagery, or if it's the trees themselves, but hopefully they're playing off one another and harmonizing really well to create as dramatic a visual statement as possible. Okay, so anyways, I hope you enjoyed this piece right here. I'm really glad, happy with how it turned out. I envisioned these rays being used in here, and when I added a couple of them, you know what I mean? It didn't look great, but it's when I added these additional ones. And then, added this in the foreground too, to kind of subdue them a little bit, and it sandwiched those rays in between imagery. We have foreground and kind of foundation images in here. Okay, so thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. If you like these videos, hope you like, share, and subscribe.